Everyone, if you've been frustrated with recruiting, especially in the part-time hourly space, especially over the last couple weeks and months, I've got some tips for you. So here's kind of what I've been hearing, and it just came through when I talked to another recruiting manager and a hiring manager team. The issue that most people seem to be having is either a lack of candidates, applicants coming into the database, or candidates not responding back. So acquisition or engaging the candidates as they come through, and then ghosting. And so there's really kind of three things I just want to give you some tips about. Number one is acquisition. Most applicant tracking systems and job boards never tell you this. It's not the job board's fault, but the process of moving a candidate from a job board to an applicant tracking system and completing an application on your website, 95% of people on a mobile phone will never complete your application. So if you're trying to hire people who are typically going to use their mobile phone, which is about 60% of the US market now, and high number specifically in the hourly part-time roles, you're not doing yourself any favors by trying to send them to your career site. That number has been statistically proven over several years from a company called Appcast, over millions of postings in millions of industries. So you got a 95% failure rate. So only 5% of the candidates are coming through. So if you can fix that from 5%, you can move it to 10%, you just basically doubled your budget. That's one tip, is how do you do that? We'll talk about that later. Another thing that's happening is if you're running the typical recruiting strategy over the last 20 years, which has been candidate comes into your website, and then the next thing you do, or your applicant tracking system, the next thing you do is you reach out on the phone or you send an email to the candidate to respond back. Well, two things you need to know about. I'm sure you've done just like I do. I get robocalls all day long in the middle of sales calls when I'm heads down working. I don't know who it's calling, but because it's my work cell phone, I have to pick it up. A lot of times, it's a robocall. So immediately block, click, go on. But for most of our job seekers, they're just not picking up the phone anymore. And they don't know your phone number. So guess what? They're not picking up your phone either. So if you're thinking, hey, candidates aren't responding, not picking up your phone, that's exactly why. Is because they're getting robocalls. And we now have an entire generation who doesn't like to speak to people specifically. So they would rather get the information via another method, which of course is text messaging in many cases in the United States. Alternatively, another solution or another problem is email. Well, there's a stat out there. I don't have the numbers in front of me here from where it's from, but it was about 40% of the US workforce, which is about 70 million people, predominantly part-time hourly, don't use email on a regular basis, more than once a week. So if you're trying to schedule an interview with a candidate and you're trying to, or respond back to them, they're not responding back via email, and that's because they don't use email. It's not because you didn't have the right subject line. It didn't, it has nothing to do with that. It's just that the channel you're trying to reach people no longer works. They're just not responding to phone calls because of robocalls, and they're not responding to emails because they just only have an email account so they could get on Instagram or Snapchat or another social channel. So that playbook that we've used for a long time doesn't work anymore, or not as efficiently, especially in the hourly part-time programs. There are other methods. If you're interested in learning more, just hit me up. I'll tell you what's out there.